mentioned the Tribbles story. It was called The Fuzzies then. And he says, that sounds expensive. Now, anybody else would have said, oh, I don't think I'll pursue this because the producer already said no. But I wrote the outline anyway and submitted it as soon as Star Trek was renewed. I submitted it in February. Did not hear back until June. And we got a call. Please come in. We're going to buy your Fuzzy story. And Gino Coon said, look, we can't give you a script assignment. You have no track record. But I won't assign your story to another writer. And if you walked in here with a script in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I'd certainly read it. Well, that was how it went step by step. He couldn't assign the whole script to me, but he would let me go step by step, which is fair. And it was the way a freelance writer could break in. And so I went step by step and brought in the script. There's some funny stories around that happened along the way. I was still in college, and I said I wanted to do a directing exercise as my last senior project, and they said, no, we don't want to waste time on you as a director. You'll have to do a writing project. In other words, go off and write something and we'll grade it. So in August, I came in, dropped a thing in the office, and they said, what's that? I said, it's my senior project. They said, what'd you write? I said, a script for Star Trek. They just filmed it this week and it'll be on in December. And it was you could hear the teeth gritting because they had not thought me a very good student. They didn't think I had any future in theater arts or television or film. They just thought I was one of those wannabes who... But see, that's the thing. Teachers don't always recognize if you're not fitting into their nice little pigeonhole. And the joke is, we had so many talented students in that department in that year. We had so many incredibly talented students who the teachers favored enormously, none of whom went anywhere. The only exception to that is a fellow named Bob Englund who became Freddy Krueger. When the Tribble episode was aired on December 29, I had a party for all my friends from school, and I know that some of them behind my back had said, well, what did he do? He wrote a script for a TV show, and somebody else turned around and said, you idiots, he went pro! He's in the business! And so Bob Englund was there, and he's such a nice guy. And he said, David, this is such a great script. It's like, I didn't know you were such a good writer. This was so funny. It was so good. And he's going on and on and on. And I finally said, Bob, please stop. It's only one episode of one TV show in 20 years. Who's going to remember it? Yeah, it's funny. You challenge the gods, right? So, the fun there was that I got to do more work for Star Trek, and I wrote the 2 books, The Trouble With Tribbles, The Making of the Episode, and The World of Star Trek, which were the first 2 real books about the production of Star Trek, written by somebody who was actually in the room. There have been a lot of books about Star Trek, written by people who... Yeah, thank you. Well, that's The World of Star Trek. There's been a lot of books written by people who weren't there. And so they've gotten a lot of it wrong. And in fact, even some of the people who were there got some stuff wrong. Mark Cushman has a couple wonderful books out. I forget what they're called, but the first one is the first season of Star Trek, and he went through all the memos and all the interviews he could find. And then the second one is season 2, and I wrote the introduction for the third one, which will be out next year, which will be season 3. At the time, we had no idea that the Tribble episode was going to be this big thing. We had no idea that Star Trek was going to be this big phenomenon. NBC canceled it after the 3rd season, and their sales department hit the ceiling. They were furious. They said, we've been doing this demographic study of what show to put on the air that we have to capture the 18 to 35 demographic of young males. And you just canceled the perfect show, the show that was pulling the audience that we wanted to get. They said, well, it wasn't pulling a rating. No, but it was pulling the audience that you wanted to get. It was getting the significant numbers of the target audience. We also were getting a lot of young women watching science fiction. And what happened in the science fiction conventions, which were previously 99% men, you'd go to a science fiction convention, it would be like 2,000 men and 5 women. And it's very uncomfortable, I think, for the women, especially because we had this wonderful artist named Bill Rossler who always had at least 1 or 2 beautiful women with him. And when Star Trek came along, a lot of young women started coming to science fiction conventions. And they got disappointed that there wasn't more Star Trek being discussed at science fiction conventions. And in 1972, they held the first Star Trek convention in New York. And 3,000 people showed up. And so they did it again in the following year, 5 or 10,000 people showed up, and the year after, 30,000 people showed up. And that's when we began to realize there is something going on with Star Trek that we had not realized before. Well, it had gone into syndication, so it was on much earlier and was catching a whole new audience. And so it was great fun because it was, at that time, it was a family of the best fans in the country, and the stars and the actors and the writers, and a lot of the effects people would show up. And we'd have fun meeting all of you. And this has been going on ever since, for 47, 48 years now, that we have had a chance to have fun with the fans. And one of the things that we like to say is that we're fans too. We love Star Trek so much that we dedicated large parts of our life to getting up in the morning, very early in the morning sometimes, driving into Paramount and spending the whole day doing Star Trek, and then coming back and doing it again the next day, and doing it again the next day, because we're fans just like you, and we got to create Star Trek, and we fell in love with it when we were creating it. Bob Justman, who is no longer with us, used to say, and so I will say it for him, thank you. We thank you because your enthusiasm and your commitment and your just fun with Star Trek, you've kept it going for almost 50 years. And I hope we have a spectacular 50th anniversary. In fact, if we don't, I'll be very disappointed. So. But that was pretty much the short version after Trouble With Tribbles was made. If you want the detailed version, you can go on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or the Nook store, and the ebook version of the Trouble With Tribbles book is available, and the ebook version of The World of Star Trek is also available, and those are the 2 books that I just mentioned. We have a microphone there. I don't know if it's turned on. If anybody else has questions or anything else you want to know about, we can talk about TV writing or writing science fiction or, I don't know, or what I had for breakfast. You're here to... that got somebody that said, what did you have for breakfast? It happens at German produce market, I think. Yes?
Okay.
I can hear you.
You just mentioned in the Exona panel that Star Trek Exona is so much better than the J.J. Abrams stuff.
Well, I didn't mean to say it that way.
It's right. I completely agree. From what I've seen in the trailer, it's what J.J. Abrams should have done with Star Trek. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on what J.J. Abrams specifically did wrong in terms.
Okay, well,
from your point of view.
Okay, this is only my opinion, but I'll share this with you about the Jar Jar Abrams movies. Good, thank you. We know, I worked with Gene Roddenberry closer than almost anybody else except Dorothy Fontana and Bob Justman, and I did a lot of the heavy lifting creating Next Gen, so we spent a lot of time together. And Star Trek is about exploring the galaxy. It is exactly what we say. It is seeking out new life and new civilizations, exploring strange new worlds, boldly going where no one has gone before. That is our mission statement. It's also the stories we want to tell. It is not about going to war. It is not about the monster of the week. It's not about the villain of the week. It's about questioning who we are as a species. What does it mean to be a human being? What is that story that you can't tell anywhere else Tell it on Star Trek. What is that story that no other show will let you do? And that was Gene's commitment. That was the speech he would give anytime a new writer came into the office. And writers were inspired by that. It's like, oh my gosh, a chance to really do something special. And, you know, people come in, I want to do another City on the Edge of Forever. I want to do Tribbles. I want to do, you know, they would say, I want to do an episode as good as. My goal was I wanted to do Blood and Fire, which I did finally for Star Trek Phase 2. But those of us who understood that Star Trek was not about the villain of the week wanted to have it be about what does it mean to be a human being, so that when you came out of the theater at the end of the movie, you saw the universe differently. And Gene was very unhappy with most of the movies because they were about fighting a villain. And he didn't want that to be what Star Trek is. He didn't want it to be Star Wars. He wanted Star Trek to be about exploring and discovering and expanding. And to me, this is where I feel, you know, I wasn't bored by the J.J. Abrams films. I watched them and I was like, okay, that's very exciting. But I wasn't inspired the same way I was by the original series. Because it was, okay, there's Spock fighting Khan, okay, that's very nice. And it was an exciting movie, but it wasn't the Star Trek I wanted to see, okay?
Okay, but...
And I know that a lot of fans felt that way.
Do you think that original concept would work in theaters today?
I don't know, but I'd sure love to have a chance to try. I'd sure like to try, but I'll tell you, we have had movies that have been about that. We've had Close Encounters of the Third Kind. We've had 2001: A Space Odyssey. We've had Contact. We've had Silent Running. There's one Gravity, even. There's Forbidden Planet, of course. That was the one I was trying to remember. Forbidden Planet was not about fighting a villain as much as it was the discovery of who or what this strange force was. And I think that's the kind of story Star Trek was always best at, and I think you can do that in the movies. And I'm disappointed that we haven't seen more of it. And I don't mind the occasional episode that does have an alien, you know, bursting out of people's chests. You know, because you want, the thing about Star Trek is you can do all kinds of different stories. When we were starting Next Generation, we listed that we could do comedy, we could do drama, we could do tragedy, we could do all kinds of different stories. And we had memos floating around listing all the different kinds of stories and all the different subjects we could do. And no other TV show had that kind of freedom.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you. Yes, hi. Thank you for being so patient.
First of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Journey, and thanks for being here. Being a writer myself, I always enjoy writer talks the most. This is the first panel this year that I actually attend, but I'm not on stage. My question is, you've worked on television for quite a long time now, and I think that the profession of a showrunner becomes even more important today because more and more people get aware that there is a showrunner at all. The shows like The Sopranos and Breaking Bad, the term is in the press all over the place right now. My question is, what, in your opinion, makes a good showrunner?
You weren't here for the Acts in Our panel, but Peter's answered that question. A good showrunner is an A-team player. He's an A player, and he hires other A players. So a good showrunner, like, I don't have to be the best writer, but I have to know who the best writers are. Even if they're better writers than me, they'll make me look good. And I did that on Land of the Lost. I brought in Norman Spinrad and Larry Niven and Ben Bova and Dorothy Fontana, all of whom I knew would write better stories than I could, and I got to look good. So the showrunner brings in the very, very best. He brings in the A-team, the very best people he can get, and listens to them. And he says, let's have fun. Let's do something special. And he listens to their contributions. Now, I've been in the showrunner position 3 times a couple times when shows went, a couple times when shows did not get into production. And I can tell you that based on the feedback I've gotten, I'm pretty good at it. And I know what I do that to me works is I listen to what people are telling me. And I might say, I don't see a place for that right now, but it's going to lurk in the back of my mind. That's such a good idea that it's going to, rattle around in my head for a while. And then 2 weeks later I say, I got it. That thing that Dan suggested, we can do it. I figured out how to do it. So a good showrunner listens because everybody on the team wants to contribute. And one showrunner I worked for, he felt his job was to be the smartest person in the room. So it didn't matter what you suggested, he'd tell you how to do it better. But he wasn't the smartest person in the room. And so a lot of great ideas died. What I was able to do on the preparation for one project was people would come in with ideas and say, oh my God, that just solves this problem, and that problem. Somebody suggested, oh wait, that never occurred to me, let's do that. And so when you listen to other people, it gets better because you get things that you wouldn't have thought of yourself. And to me, that would be the greatest skill you could do, is be a good listener.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question.
What kind of a show would you do today? Let's say AMC called you up tomorrow, gave you carte blanche, you could do whatever you wanted. What kind of a show would you write today? Or
I have two that I would do, and I'd say here's A, here's B. You tell me which one you want to do. One would be my Star Wars series, which is a Space Wars series, but it's not the Enterprise, the biggest and the best. It's this little dinky destroyer-class ship. It's Das Boot, and these guys have been drafted, and they don't want to go to war, and they suddenly find themselves running, supply missions, and over here they have to deliver something. Over here, oh my God, we're on a suicide mission because we have to be a decoy to attract the attention while the real heroes are over there. And so it would be, and it's not a comedy, but there's the 3 or 4 books have already been published. There's Voyage of the Star Wolf, The Middle of Nowhere, and Blood and Fire. So that would be one. The other one I would do we've had conversations with a number of people about that. So we actually have the first 4 scripts written in the first 2 years of story arcs. So, and we are taking that around and saying, come on, let's do this. The time is right. The other one I would love to do is The War Against the Tor. And I have written 4 books on that series, Matter for Man and Day for Damnation, A Rage for Revenge, and A Season for Slaughter. And the 5th book is almost done. And it's called A Method for Madness. And I've had a couple calls from people who say, are the rights to this available? Could we do it? And I said, yeah, but if we do it, it's going to be under my terms. I'm the showrunner, and here are the writers, and here's how I want to do it. And nobody calls me back after that conversation. And I said, look, and one person said, why are you being so hard to work with? Just sell it to us and you'll make some money. I say, because I've invested 30 years of my life developing this whole story, and I'm not going to hand it off to somebody who just sees it as a monster show. Either we do it my way, we do it the way that I have invested my life in, or it's not for sale. And there are some people who say, we'll get back to you, and we're having some conversations. But in Hollywood, everybody's always having conversations about everything. So for me to say we're having conversations is, that's the pretty face we put on it. So. But those are the 2 I would love to do.
thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Great question. Thank you. Yeah? Hey, how are you?
Hello. Thanks for coming.
Let me just interrupt for a second. I'm really glad to be here. I've never been to Germany before. Well, that's not quite true. I once was on a train from, I think, Switzerland to Denmark, and we rode through Germany, but I never got off. But today, this is my first trip to Germany, and I don't know what is overwhelming more, is it the quality of the good food, the beautiful hotel, or just how friendly everybody is. So probably just how friendly everyone is. And so thank you for that. Now, your question, please.
You have been writing both for Star Trek as serialized stories,
Yes.
and for Babylon 5, which is a long
That story arc, yeah.
story arc. Is there any? Can you tell a little bit about the difference how you approach writing an episode for one or the other?
Well, my Babylon 5 story was more episodic than part of a larger story arc because the first season Joe wanted to set things up, and he brought in Larry Titilio and Dorothy Fontana and Marlon Ellison and a bunch of other very, very good writers. Peter David, I think, was in there. Excuse me. Was. And we all did episode stories. Joe let us know where he was going, but for the most part, we were not yet into a story arc. With Star Trek and other shows, all of those were episodic too. Now, the funny one is Land of the Lost. That was 1974. I was the showrunner. I had a story arc in my head that we would introduce a new part of the Land of the Lost every episode, but each one would be a standalone episode. I knew the audience would be watching them in order, but I knew that if they got out of order, it would be okay too. The only time I broke that rule was the last episode of the season. I didn't know if we were going to be renewed, so I wrote a kind of an ending, but it was an open-end ending, so that if the show was renewed, it could go on. But it was also how it kind of time circle. You have to see it. It's called Circle, and it's how they get out. But they get out by coming back in. So, but that one had a story arc only because it was in my head at the time. Nobody knew the concept of story arcs back in 1974. It didn't happen until a show called Hill Street Blues, which was a few years later. Yes. That was Stephen Bochco's first big hit. It had a slow start. Some people were watching, and then all of a sudden, but NBC was thinking about canceling it, and then it won like 13 Emmy Awards, and they said that would be embarrassing if we canceled it. And after it won the Emmy Awards, it became a big, big hit. It was on the air for 7 years, and then Bochco went on and created L.A. Law and Cop Rock, which was unfairly panned by the critics, and a bunch of other good shows. But that created the story arc. We got Saying Elsewhere with story arcs, and then another favorite show. And Tom Fontana was on, no relation to Dorothy, was on Saying Elsewhere. He went on and created Oz and Homicide. And so the whole thing about story arcs developed partly because, and I think this is one of the reasons, in 1977 ABC put on a mini-series called Roots. And this was very, very popular, big ratings, and everybody looked at, gee, what can we do if we tell a big story across multiple episodes? Could we do a TV series that way? And the mini-series concept became the story arc. So, yeah, it's an interesting question there. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Let me, you have a question. Go ahead.
Yes.
Hi, Peter.
Hi.
This is Peter, who takes care of Phase 2 for the Phase 2 website for Europe. And so if you have watched any of the Phase 2 episodes, or you've gone on to the website, thank Peter.
That's right, thank you, Star Trek Phase 2.de, if you haven't found it yet. Now, you were talking earlier about the 50-year anniversary of Star Trek coming up. Now, if I look at the UK, Doctor Who, they did a fantastic 50-year anniversary special.
Well, that's because they're English and they know how to appreciate their own heritage and their own culture. In the United States, we're insane. If there's no money involved, we don't do it.
Well, I think the BBC earned enough money on that episode. It was broadcast worldwide and showed in cinema. Oh, yes.
I will tell you that the U.S. audience for the Doctor Who 50th anniversary was spectacular. It was like, people would say, do not call me tonight. I will be watching the 50th I will be watching Adventure in Time, Space and Time, or I'll be watching The Day of the Doctor. I'll be watching The Name of the Doctor, but whatever you do, don't interrupt me. And they had the 3D episode in the theaters. And I will tell you, it was, for some of us, it was like 2-3 weeks of Doctor Who heaven. I was just thrilled. I missed the first 3D screening, but apparently it was so successful that they did it again the second night. Somebody called me and said, "I've got a ticket, let's go!" and it was a whole bunch of people who'd seen it before, but plus more friends. And it was wonderful to be in a room with like 3,000 Doctor Who fans, and Tom Baker shows up, and we all go, "Oh yes!" and all of the little in jokes, and oh man, I know I've been talking about Star Trek, but I'm a huge Doctor Who fan too, and so yeah. I hope that Star Trek will have as good a 50th anniversary as the Doctor Who anniversary.
I mean, I say that BBC had put a template down. Why can't you just emulate what the BBC has done? Say to Paramount, look, the BBC has done a fantastic time with it. This is what...
There's nobody at Paramount who sees Star Trek, since Gene Roddenberry's gone, and Machel's gone, there's nobody at Paramount who still holds the Star Trek vision. So right now it's, oh, let's reboot this. Who can we get to do this? And so they're not, there's nobody there right now.
You
Peter.
mean like the guy did a demo reel?
We have 2 years.
Star Wars movies?
Feel free to start a letter campaign, okay?
Well, actually, I think there's a better solution.
Yeah.
And that is there is a fan film series called Star Trek Phase 2 and Star Trek Exeter.
That's probably.
And I think they are the ones who should be holding the torch for the 50th anniversary.
You know what? I'll tell you what. I'll promise you what I will do. I do know a couple of people over at CBS. Bill Bishop's in charge of the whole Blu-ray division. And I'll call him up and say, Bill, what can we do for the 50th anniversary? And see if I can get something started. But no promises, but I will call him. Okay?
Why not get there?
Peter, we've been having that conversation with CBS for 5 years. It's not going anywhere. Les Moon Vis doesn't want to do it, okay?
Yeah.
Let's go to the next question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Hi there.
Hi David, yeah, it's Stefan here. I'm basically translating your words and the words of the other authors for Phase 2 into German.
Yeah.
And, the Trouble With Tribbles is, of course, one of the most known episodes. Everyone who hasn't watched any Star Trek knows.
Even if you haven't watched Star Trek, you know about the Tribbles. There was a Delta Airlines did, here's your flight safety rules commercial or video. And 4.5 minutes in, they show a guy, here's, put your tray table up, put your seat back up, and the guy's got a tribble on his tray table. He puts it up and puts it away, and then all of a sudden a whole bunch of tribbles fall on him. And it's hysterically funny. The whole thing is very funny. But it's funny because you don't even have to be a Star Trek fan to get the joke.
But we do get the joke.
Yeah, well, we're in on the joke.
Yeah.
Anyway, you have a question.
Yeah, it was, since it's a comedy, it works so well with the 60s ultra series of Star Trek. I mean, they try to do comedic Star Trek episodes later in Next Gen, DS9, Voyager. Not even Enterprise, they tried it. But often they were holding.
There's a thing we say in theater, dying is easy, comedy is hard.
Yeah, I think
And it's very difficult to do comedy well. You have to do it with a straight face. You cannot allow the audience to know that you think it's funny. You have to be taking it absolutely serious and let the audience decide if it's funny or not.
All right.
And so it's ironic that you can't be funny if you think you're funny. You can only be funny if you play it straight. Yeah, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I get it, yeah. And then it works. Do you think, which of the later Star Trek series would have had the most potential to do a proper comedy episode? I mean, a couple of characters were quite funny, like Brent Spiner's Data, of course. And
well, I think DS9 proved the point when they did their Tribble episode, which was not only one of the funniest hours of television I've ever seen, but it was also one of the best Star Trek episodes. They really did a brilliant job with that, so I have to give them credit. I think that answers your question.
yeah, probably the one with the James Bond theme.
Yeah, where they go back in time to the original Enterprise and you find out there was a bomb in the Tribble, and you find out who was throwing the Tribbles at Kirk. So
that's probably that show would be the most funny one. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I was there when they shot parts of it, and it was great fun. They did work so hard. Yes, how are you?
Great. I want to ask about something which I take very personal, and that is 3D movies.
Oh, good.
Okay, let me, fast as I can, give you a story what I'm talking about. My eyes do not allow me to utilize 3D technology.
Yeah.
In Europe, theaters can't afford to buy 50,000 formats for the movies, so they choose only 3D.
Mm-hmm.
So I have lost 2 years of movie-going experience because of it only coming out in 3D. And the solution had to be, I had to go to some guy who out of his garage converted 3D glasses into 2D glasses and paid him a ton of money to ship me to Netherlands. And then I went to my theater and said, can you reimburse me for this? And their response was, "Yeah, right."
3D is, on the one hand, over here, it is a gimmick. On the other hand, over here, it is an enormously powerful theatrical tool. Most directors are somewhere in the middle. They don't know how to use it. And then, like yourself, there are a lot of people who can't see in 3D.
30% of the
Yeah.
theater going public.
But in the United States, you have a choice. Do you want to see the movie in 3D or do you want to see the movie flat? Because they usually play it both ways. I'm sorry that you don't have that choice available to you, but at least you have the 2D glasses that allow you to see the movie.
Yeah.
There are some movies that I think work better in 3D. Gravity, Life of Pi, the original House of Wax. But as it happens, there are a lot of movies you don't need to see in 3D. I think it adds a lot to a movie, but I want to see a process where we don't have to wear glasses, and there's a possibility that we will see 3D TVs like that within the next 10 years, and then we might see 3D take off in a whole different way. So we'll see, but thanks.
I hope that they pay attention to the medicine behind it.
Yes.
Like they've done in this current version.
One of the things that I started skipping some of the 3D movies and waited until they show up on the satellite because I have a 3D TV, and because it's like, well, I don't think that's going to be an A picture, and I don't have to rush out to see it. I don't rush out to the movies as much as I used to. I've seen Captain America in the theaters. That was great. We saw X-Men: Days of Future Past. That was even better. So, for the Marvel pictures, we'll rush out and see those. But there's a lot of movies that I can wait till it shows up on the satellite. Yeah. Thank you. Hello.
Hello, Mr. Gerrold. Nice to have you here.
I'm so glad to be at this convention. I've been hearing about FedCon for years, and I want to go to FedCon. Thank Dirk for finally getting off his butt and inviting me.
Absolutely. Going back to the 50th anniversary that's coming up for Star Trek, Doctor Who had an adventure in space and time, and Mary Poppins had Saving Mr. Banks. Do you think that there's a docudrama in the cards, maybe showing the origins of Star Trek?
Dorothy Fontana and I were at Paramount over and over, and several other places, pitching a mini-series, 10 parts, based on the world of Star Trek, my book. So we didn't even have to ask Paramount's permission. But we went to Paramount first, and they said, "Oh, we can't do it because JJ won't allow it." I said, "Doesn't have it?" No, JJ won't allow anything to do with Star Trek unless he controls it. That was our deal. I said, "Well, why were you guys so stupid as to make that deal?" So we pitched it, and in the few years since then, we've lost half a dozen people whose contributions to the show we would have loved to have interviewed and gotten more details. So we pitched it. We took it to a couple other places. There was, I think, not the History Channel, but a channel that does docudramas, and they said, "Oh, this is a great idea." No, thanks. So everybody knows it's a great idea. Nobody wants to do it because it would probably be very expensive. There was a show called The Real History where they interviewed Herb Solow and a few other people, and they actually did a pretty good hour about how Gene Roddenberry sold the show. And it was a very down-to-earth, because Gene was this great visionary, but as a producer, he was something of not the best manager of people. He was not he was not the best producer, but he surrounded himself with some very good people, and the pieces fell into place. And Herb Solow and Bob Justman and Eddie Milkus and a few others get enormous credit. Gino Kuhn, of course. Because they actually, and Dorothy Fontana, filled in a lot of the blanks that Gene had not filled in. So the creation of Star Trek, once the show was sold, was very much a team effort. Now, getting something special for the 50th anniversary, I don't know. I'm not I'm not on Paramount's payroll. I can make a couple of phone calls. That's the most I can do. But beyond that, Paramount is Richard Arnold will confirm this. Anybody else who's close to Paramount will confirm this. If they can't see a way to make a big profit out of it, they're not going to bother. What they did for Paramount Pictures big 50th anniversary, that was back in 1986. Or no, it was their 75th anniversary. They got every big star in Hollywood to come and be in one big family photo. And I think they maybe had a big banquet or something. And that was, that was it. And then they released this photo. Here's Elizabeth Taylor and Gary Cooper and John Wayne and so-and-so, and all in front of the studio. And there's this big picture. And it's a great picture. But it's like, Paramount doesn't want to spend money unless they know they're going to make it back. Which really, if you were a shareholder for Paramount, you'd probably feel that's a good idea. So, yeah. Who else has questions about? Yeah, thank you. About writing or whatever it's your convention, you ask the questions you want to have answered.
Hello.
Hello.
Maybe I'm not right, but are you the author of the Biological Nation?
No, I don't think so.
The Thor?
Oh, the Thor, yeah.
Yes.
I'm not familiar with it. Yeah, the Biological Invasion is the German title. Yes, I wrote A Matter for Men, Day for Damnation, Rage for Revenge, Season for Slaughter, yes, and Method for Madness, which someday will be finished. So, I hope this year.
Yes, you will finish it?
Huh?
You will finish it this year?
It's a...
You will finish it this year?
The fifth book, yes, I hope. The good Lord willing and the creek don't rise.
I got a question, but isn't it a good time to do a mini-series about this? Because it's very...
I would love to do it. Have you got $40 million?
No, but
I
will start a collection.
Oh, okay, yes, please. I'd love to do it. And maybe someday somebody will get so enthusiastic they'll come to me and say, what I would like to do is I'd love to do a graphic novel first. And that would serve as the storyboard, and that would say, look, this is it. And then the audience would discover it as a graphic novel, and we would build up the, because they don't go to novels anymore, they go to comic books. So if you say, look, we have this big hit comic book, oh yes, Marvel, DC, let's make some money. The industry is very strange and very weird. From where you're sitting, and I have been there where you're sitting, is why would they make a movie if he's so good? I'd love to see it. Well, yeah, but they have to know that they're going to make their money back. And there are not a lot of producers who really understand how difficult science fiction is. And a lot of science fiction in the movies is the monster. And to really do science fiction where you really challenge the audience with ideas like 2001 or Blade Runner, Forbidden Planet is very old, it takes a producer willing to test, to push the boundaries, to push the limits and say, nobody's done this before, let's try this. And that's very hard to do in a business that says, I don't want to lose $100 million at the box office. So, thanks. Yeah, anybody else? Or I could ramble on. I'll get to the second, Peter. I have books for sale. I will be signing autographs tomorrow morning, and then in the afternoon I'll be up at the Tribble booth, Tribble Toys. And so I have some copies of the Tribble script, and the More Tribbles, More Trouble script. Hold it up. And I also have the book I did that won the Hugo and the Nebula called The Martian Child. It's all about my little boy. And I love that kid so much. He's almost 30 now. But it surprised everybody, first of all, that David would be, David is adopting a kid? What the heck is that about? And then I brought this marvelous little boy with me everywhere I went. People met him and they said, oh my gosh, what a great little guy. And I wrote this wonderful story about him, and he turned out wonderfully. This was a kid who got a bad start in life. Now he's holding up the Martian Child book. He had a bad start in life, and I believe that he had such a big heart that he would turn into a wonderful human being, and I was right. He has turned into a terrific guy. And they made a movie of it starring John Cusack called Martian Child. And the movie wasn't as good as the book, but it was still a good movie. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend searching for it. It's on Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever. And my book on writing, for those of you who are interested in writing, this is all the stuff I learned. It's called Worlds of Wonder. He's holding that up. I did not plant him there to do this. But Worlds of Wonder is everything I learned from all the good writers, and I'm sharing it with everybody else who wants to write. So if you're interested in writing, seriously, there's a lot of good information in there. I taught screenwriting at Pepperdine University for nearly 20 years, and so I had a chance to road test this material and see that it actually worked. Peter, what's your question?
Now, as a child, I was very keen on science fiction, and for me, Isaac Asimov was one of the #1 authors which I read. I always found it interesting that he either read very short stories or stories that went over several books. He didn't seem to get the story in a book.
He did several standalone novels, but towards the last half of his career, yes.
Yeah.
It was either a short story or a trilogy. There was no in between.
Yeah, that's right. So I always found that quite inspirational, and was surprised that very few films are made of his.
There's only been 1 or 2 films from Isaac's work. One is Nightfall, which I have not seen. I'm told it is one of the worst movies ever made. Another is I, Robot, which Isaac would have risen from the grave and killed a lot of people because it was such a bad retelling of the robotic pre-laws. And I think that's the only 2. No, there's The Bicentennial Man, which starred Robin Williams. Actually, the writer who has had the most of his books turned into movies is Philip K. Dick. There's been Blade Runner and Total Recall and Minority Report, and his stories have translated very, very well into movies. So I think a large part of it is the producers have to see it as a movie in their heads and get enthusiastic about it. Because if you're going to make a movie, you're going to be investing 2 to 3 years of your life into it. And then you're going to be investing 2 or 3 years of your life into selling it, so you can invest 2 or 3 years of life. And, all that time raising the money and preparing it, so you can actually make the movie, which is going to be a 2 or 3 year process. So the movies have outgrown themselves. This is why I love Star Trek Axanar, Star Trek Phase 2, all the independent fan productions or independent productions, because they're going back to the heart and soul of, we really love this, we want to do a Star Trek, we want to do this, we want to do that, and we're going to do it because we love it, and they find ways to make it happen without the $40 million investment or the $100 million investment. So I think the internet is going to save science fiction films. And I would recommend you look for, there's a film called Primer. They made it for $7,000. And that's brilliant science fiction. There's another one called Pi, which was done, it's in black and white. I think that was $30,000. There was, I think it was Q, which was done very, very low budget. Moon was done very, very low budget. So there's a lot of really wonderful things that you can find if you stop depending on the big studios, because the big studios have to, if we're spending $100 billion, we're going to make $1 billion at the box office, and they go to this idea that, well, we have to have this, this, and this, because the last movie to make $1 billion had a this, this, and this, so we had to do this thing. That's why all the movies look alike sometimes. One of the challenges, there's somebody who was saying, gosh, I really love the Transformers. I said, okay, tell me the plot of the second picture. There was Optimus Prime. Yeah, okay, yeah, he was a truck. So, on the other hand, if I said to you, tell me the plot of Gravity, you would say, okay, there was this astronaut and the meteorites, the debris, destroyed her space shuttle, and first she went drifting, and George Clooney rescued her, and then they got their way back to the shuttle. It was totally destroyed, and then she got to the Russian space station, and then she got to the end. And you can actually tell the story because you remember there's a real story. That's what people go to the movies for a real story, not just for lots and lots of special effects.
But I think you can say the same of the first Star Trek movie, from the original series.
Yeah, Star Trek motion picture.
Yeah, that was all the effects, and the story was weak. It wasn't until the second story.
No, what happened there was Paramount said, we paid a lot of money for these special effects, we want to see them. So they cut out a lot of the story and had these long, long special effects shots. And the only place where you got to see the movie the way Robert Wise, the director, intended it was if you were on an airplane. Although I do believe the Robert Wise cut is available somewhere these days. But the thing is that Robert Wise didn't get final cut, and Gene Roddenberry was rewriting the script even after scenes were shot, so they reshoot them. So the picture got released late, and literally it was sent to the theaters wet, which means it would come out of the developer, and they wouldn't run it through the dryer. They put it in the can, and the first trip through the projector was when it got dried off. That's how late it was. So, all right. Well, let me take this next fellow.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Which might actually be a follow-up question to that one. Here's one for the writing teacher. How do you get from idea to script, like TV script? How do you structure your thought so that you can produce it in that format?
Okay, oh boy, this is a great question. Okay, so first, this goes back to a guy named James Blish, who says, first of all, find out who does it hurt. Now, the long version of that is a story is about a person who has a problem. Now, there's two parts to the problem. One is the external circumstance. And, like, for instance, the external circumstance in Gravity is Sandra Bullock is lost in space. She's drifting in orbit. The internal circumstance is the emotional reason why this circumstance is a problem. And Sandra Bullock knew what to do exactly each time. She would just do it, and we would just watch her do it. And it would be, okay, that's still very exciting. What makes it emotionally involving is that she has all this self-doubt, and she has to overcome her own doubt. And, you know, I crashed the simulator 5 times, and she still has to figure out how to land the Chinese shuttle, escape pod. And so there's an internal problem. So your story is about a person who has a problem. So your first part of the story is, how do you let the audience know this person has this problem? You set up the problem. The middle part of the story is you show all the parts of the problem that the person is having trouble solving, everything that doesn't work. And then there's a point at which the person understands the nature of the problem and starts trying to solve it specifically. And then you get to the point where somebody says or does something that it's what I call the triggers this transformation, this realization that, oh, if I'm the problem, I'm also the solution. I have to get over myself. Use the Force, Luke. Right? And that's when the hero stops being the farm boy and becomes the Jedi Knight, to shift movies. And that's the point at which the problem gets solved in like 3 minutes and everybody goes home. And sure enough, you know, Luke uses the Force, blows up the Death Star, we all go home and get medals, except for the Wookiee. So that's really how you get from idea, what is your idea, and then you ask those questions and you have the beginnings of your outline. Was that clear to you?
Absolutely, thank you.
Good, thank you. I hope that was clear to everyone. Those of you who want to do more writing, go pick up a copy of my book, Worlds of Wonder. We'll have it available. So, yeah.
If I may follow up on that.
Yes, please.
Bearing all that in mind, simple question, what's your favorite movie?
Well, I have no one favorite movie, but there are movies I just get caught up in over and over. The original King Kong, the 1953 War of the Worlds, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the original, 1956. Them, 1954, Giant Dance in the Desert, love that. Wizard of Oz, Singing in the Rain. And you notice a lot of these are older movies.
I remember.
And I do love The Godfather. Because it works on so many levels. It's a character story, it's perfectly structured plot, the acting is magnificent, the production values are terrific, and there's all these different levels in the story that it kind of portrays this is how business people think. The mafia is a business. And so I do love that one. And one of my all-time favorites, but it's hard to say is a movie because there's like 4 different versions of it. There's the TV miniseries of it, and there's the cut-down version of the TV miniseries, and there's 2 versions of the film. There's the film and the extended version. is a film called Das Boot, which was made here in Germany. And when we got it in the States, it took a while before we could track down the whole miniseries, because we got it as a 2-hour movie, and then, but eventually I was able to track down a copy of the entire miniseries, which I thought was even better. So, but it is, what I love about it is all the characters are there. It's very claustrophobic. It gives you this very dark feeling of what it must have been like to be in a submarine, and it's about the human experience of the war. One of my studies is war. World War I, World War II, some of the ancient Roman battles, the American Civil War, the American Revolutionary War. And the more you study about war, you realize you can take a side and say, hooray for our side, we won, we kicked the crap out of the other side, yay for us. But if you really start looking, you realize most war stories are about these poor guys in the trenches or in the front lines who, on both sides, who are just doing the job they got sent to do, but really want to go home and be with their families. And there's real courage on all sides. And I think the real villains in any war are the diplomats who got everybody into it, the leaders. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, maybe everybody knows it in this room, but I need some clarification of the bigger picture regarding phase 2. So I tell you what I know, and maybe you can fill in the gaps. Phase 2 was brought when 1 year before the movie was conceived. That's what I understood.
Well, I tell you what, I get your question. So
okay, and then it ends with your involvement in the Phase 2 fan base. So I want to know how you go.
I'll give you the full story. Phase 2 started with James Cawley, was a good friend of William Ware Tice, who was the costume designer with Star Trek from the very beginning. And he was there for Next Generation. James Cawley was this big costumer. He's also a very successful Elvis impersonator. He's just amazing. And so he was getting material and patterns and even costumes from Bill Tice. And he had this incredible collection. And he and some friends started building exact replicas of props. And then they decided they would build a piece of a bridge set. And somewhere in there they said, we have all this, let's make a little film. And they made this little, I think, 20-minute film, which I still haven't seen. And they made it for themselves. Well, one of their guys uploaded it to YouTube. What happened was, this was while they were shooting Enterprise, the TV series, and everybody shut down the set for an hour, and they all gathered around and watched this episode of Star Trek New Voyages, that's what it was called. And some of the people on the set at Enterprise were saying, wow, why can't we do this? And Doug Drexler, who had given James a lot of help and a lot of advice, got called into the legal department, and they said, did you give them any of our property? No. Did you give them any... did you do anything for them on our paycheck? No. Is there any Paramount money involved in this? No. Okay. And so the legal department at Paramount did something very smart. That in itself is amazing. There's a thing in Hollywood, there's a story, if you can't be a successful lawyer in Hollywood, you go and be a studio lawyer. And if you can't be a good studio lawyer, you work at Paramount. Probably shouldn't have said that in public. So, I actually knew some of the people in the Paramount legal department. They were pretty good, but so it was kind of a slam on them. But the people at Paramount, the head of the legal department, picks up the phone and calls James. Oh, Doug Drexler calls James and says, "You're going to get a call from Paramount. Don't panic." Well, of course, Paramount. So, because James is in New York. And upstate New York, not the big city. And so they call in and they say, are you selling tickets? No. Are you selling advertising? Did you get any help from Paramount? No. Okay, You can't sell tickets, you can't advertise, you can't make any money, have fun. And basically they said to him, make all the fan films you want, have fun, but you're not allowed to show a profit, because then you're in competition with the copyright holder. So James Cawley has been excruciatingly, rigorously honest about following the rules. I can't speak for anybody else. I don't know what their agreements are. But James has been very good. And so they built the rest of their bridge, and then they built some corridors, and they raised money this way, and they got donations. They raised money that way. And they filmed another episode, and then they brought in Walter Koenig to do an episode called To Serve All My Days, and Dorothy Montana wrote the script for it. And that one looked like a real Star Trek episode. So they did another one with a script by Mark Scott Zicree and J. Michael Reeves, and Zicree directed, and they brought in George Takei, and that was, what's that called? World Enough in Time, something like that. And that looked like a real Star Trek episode. It was great. And then James Cawley called me and said, we'd like to do Blood and Fire, the script you did for Next Generation, and they didn't shoot. Can we do that? And I came in and directed it, and Denise Crosby came in and starred. And Bill Blair, who does more aliens than anybody else, came in and played a part in that. And so that was a two-parter. And there's been a bunch of other episodes since then. Katoomba and The Holiest Thing will be released in a month or two. And next month they shoot Mind Sifter, which has a terrific script. We will be shooting another one called Origins. I'm not sure whether we're going to shoot it in the fall or next June. And basically the idea has been, exactly as with Paramount has promised, we have not sold or made a profit. It's all been fan supported. Last year, when I was, James asked me to visit the set and help out with the shooting of The Holiest Thing, and he asked me to do a polish on the script, so I did. And Alec Peters and I were there, and the thing was a little disorganized, and we said, James, we've got to get better organized than this. And it wasn't a big argument, but it was a serious discussion, and James says, okay, Alec, you take over the production, and David, you take over keeping the scripts good. You'll be the showrunner, and Alec will be the... So that was how those decisions were made. And what we did, our first order of business, was to move out of this terrible building we were in, and where we had 6,000 square feet. We had to tear down some sets to build up others to use them. And now we've moved into a facility that has 13,000 square feet, and that gives us enough room to duplicate all of the original sets that were on the Paramount lot, Soundstage 10, a complete bridge, the big curved corridor, the transporter room, the sick bay, the med lab, Kirk's quarters, and there's even room for the engine room, which it had to be on a different set. No, I don't remember. No, it was on. Okay, anyway, we have all the room to duplicate all the original Star Trek sets. And James is such a stickler for accuracy. Sometimes I just want to smack him, because one time he said, no, we can't shoot until I repaint this wall. So we had to wait for the paint to dry. He's just so, I love it. I mean, basically, if it was the lot on Paramount, we'd have said, I tell you what, the director would have said, I can shoot this from another angle, we don't need that wall. Because when you're spending $10,000 a day or more. But anyway, we have got, Alec arranged, and James completed the deal. So we have this new facility. We have Tobias Richter, who is, Tobias, is that you in the back there? Stand up so everybody can see you. Tobias is our digital effects genius. And he is absolutely a treasure. He is worth his weight in gold, but don't tell him I said this. It'll go to his head and he'll want my share of chocolate or something. So, but if you saw what he did for Axanar, it's some of the best special effects I've ever seen, digital effects. So, Tobias, so everything we're constantly upgrading so that Star Trek Phase 2 will look like the next part of Star Trek. We changed the name to Phase 2 because our conceit is that We had 3 seasons of the original Star Trek. This is the 4th season, the 5th season, and so on. So we're doing the episodes that we would want to have seen on the original Star Trek. One of the episodes we might do is called Escape from the Planet of the Tribbles. And that's where we meet man-eating tribbles. So Uhura and Chapel and Janice Rand will have to save the men. Because they're man-eating tribbles, not women-eating tribbles. Yes, what's your question?
Just a short comment. And a follow-up to Peter's question about, the BBC doing great documentaries, even stories about documentaries like An Adventure in Time and Space, documentary about Doctor Who. And there are a couple of very good biopics, like HARLIE or Aviator. Why is no one in Hollywood, especially now with the 50th anniversary of Star Trek approaching, doing a biopic about Gene Roddenberry? I read this autobiography.
Oh, I'll tell you this
awesome.
about Gene Roddenberry.
I mean, he was
He was loved by everybody unless you worked for him. And that's why there will probably never be a biopic of him, at least not while there are people to say, no, that's not how I remember it. Okay?
It's a shame when he was...
He gave us Star Trek, he was a great visionary, but
apart from that, it was a World War II, it was a cop, it was a writer, it was a private pilot, crashed with this plane, saved his crew, and the biography is also really like a great movie.
possibly. If you have 50 million, go to Hollywood and sell it.
I'm a waiter, I don't know.
Nobody in Hollywood is all that interested in doing a film about Gene.
Too bad.
So, well, there are a lot of terrific stories about a lot of great people that will never be made into movies, partly because the enemies list got too long. Okay? So, Gene is lucky that Paramount named a building after him. I will tell you part of the problem was Gene had a lawyer who was, let me tell you this, Vogons would have run screaming from the room. And the negotiations, this is the reason why there was so much time between every Star Trek movie, is because the negotiations would bog down. Even if Gene wasn't making the movie, his lawyer was in there demanding a bigger piece for the right to do Star Trek, and he was holding people up. Gene would say, if I tell the fans it's not real Star Trek, you won't make any money at the box office. And so Paramount really didn't, the Paramount lawyers just didn't want to get into a room and negotiate any kind of a deal. And that's the real history.
All right.
And it was Gene's lawyer.
Okay.
You cannot say enough bad things about that man. Okay. Yeah, Gene would have had a much better reputation if he'd have shot his lawyer. I'd have had a better reputation if I'd have shot Gene's lawyer. There's Bill Shatner, I love dearly, he's such a workaholic, is doing a documentary about the making of Star Trek The Next Generation. Are we out of time?
Yeah, we're running out of time.
Okay, I don't want to go late, so I'll just finish up this story. So I went in and was interviewed by Bill, and we were talking about this situation with the lawyer who was out of control, and I said, well, there was a day when we were on the 4th floor and he was standing by an open window, and I was tempted to push him out the window, but I didn't want to get my hands dirty. And Bill, his jaw just dropped. He said, that's a great story. That's going in the documentary. So we actually will be, when that documentary comes out, you'll hear about some of the problems we had on Next Generation. We were enthusiastic as hell. We just really wanted to do a great show for you guys, but Gene's lawyer made that damn near impossible, which is why the first 2 years of Star Trek Next Generation were not as good as they could have been until Gene was promoted to producer emeritus. That's it. You want me to say goodbye?
Yeah, you may say goodbye. I think that were great and nice last words with whom you wanted to kill.
Let me say thank you again. I really am having a great time, and if you guys are having as much fun as I am and you're having the time of your lives, I said again, this is my first trip to Germany, my first trip to FedCon, and I hope it's not my last because you guys are the best, and I just think this is a wonderful place. So I'm so grateful to have been invited. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gerrold.